Tens of thousands of people are fleeing Syria's third largest city, Homs, in fear that Islamist-led rebels will press on with their advance. One war monitor says they're already just 5 kilometres outside the city. While the rebels seized Hama to the north yesterday, it was a second major blow to President Bashar al-Assad, who lost control of the strategic city of Aleppo last week. Well, this footage shows rebels entering the city, apparently unopposed. Well, the United Nations says fighting's now displaced more than 280,000 people in the northwest of the country. And the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called this reignited war a collective failure of the international community. Well, our correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher is monitoring the situation from Beirut. Good to talk to you, Barbara. Just bring us up to date on what we know about this latest advance.
Well, Regini, what we've got is statements by the Rebel Operations Center saying that they have advanced quite significantly from Hama. They have passed through 2 main towns, and they are now about 5 kilometers from Homs itself, and they have posted video on their channels showing them in a town very close to Homs, at least appearing to show them in that town. Their movements have been also confirmed by a war monitor, although we haven't independently been able to verify these reports. But if they are true, then that has been an astonishing advance after having taken Hama yesterday, fighting around the city for several days. And then we'd also been hearing that the government forces had been taking steps to try to slow any advance towards Homs, for example, bombing a bridge on the main road in order to try to prevent them from moving forward. But again, if what we're hearing from the rebels and from the war monitor are correct, then that hasn't deterred them, and they are now at the gates pretty much of Homs, which is the 3rd largest city in Syria and a very strategic one.
Seeing from the Syrian army. And Barbara, just again...
well, the Syrian...
Oh yeah, I was just repeating that question in case you couldn't hear it. Do continue, Barbara.
The Syrian defense minister had said that, for example, in Hama, when the forces withdrew, that this was a temporary tactical move. They were doing so in order to save civilian lives, and that they were still in position, and suggesting that there would be a counterstrike, but that didn't happen. And as I mentioned, the focus has been on Homs, apparently without too much success. So I think one thing we can definitely say since the past week, over the past week, as the advance has happened so quickly on major cities, the army has been exposed as just very weak, perhaps much weaker than even the rebels expected. Now that has to do with the state of the army itself. You know, it's been widely reported that the troops are demoralized, they haven't been paid that much, they haven't been maintained that much over the past years. But also, of course, it has to do with the fact that Bashar al-Assad's allies, Russia and Iran, which have been propping him up for the past years, and were very significant sources of military power. Russian airstrikes, for example, Iranian-backed militias which were fighting on the ground, particularly Lebanon's Hezbollah, which is now very much preoccupied with the military campaign against it by Israel. Those are not in the theater of war in the way they used to be. And so I think all of these factors seem to have indicated that the army is just pulling back or unable to stop this advance. Now, having said that, Homs is a very strategic city. It's a sort of crossroads city where the main routes around the country converge. And it is on the road to Damascus. It is the main route to the coastal area, which is Bashar al-Assad's political stronghold. So we'll see if the regime can get together a defense of this main, the core of its power as the rebels and stop the rebel advance. But so far, they have really been able to seize territory at an extraordinary speed.
And Barbara, just briefly, hundreds of thousands of people displaced as a result of this renewed conflict.
That's right. Some of them from Homs. This is the members of Bashar al-Assad's Alawite community who are afraid that the Islamist-led rebels will take revenge on them, although the leader of the rebels has been saying that won't happen. You also have displacement in Idlib, which is the northwest of the country, the long-term rebel stronghold. There you have had counter-strikes by the Russians and the Syrians, so people have been displaced there as well.
OK, Barbara Plett-Usher monitoring developments from Beirut. Thank you very much. Now let's speak to Yazid Saeed, a senior fellow at the Malcolm H. Kerr Carnegie Middle East Centre. Welcome to the programme. First of all, just to remind our viewers, just tell us about who these rebels are and what their aim is.
Well, there's a coalition of rebels led by the core group, which is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, basically al-Sham, which is an old name for Syria liberation body, which used to be an affiliate of al-Qaeda, later broke away with it, fought against al-Qaeda affiliates who remained in Syria, and has gone through a certain transformation over the years to become more of a sort of common variety Islamist group, which in recent years has shown that it has provided better governance and economic growth in its area of control in the northwest than any other part of Syria, which is quite striking. There are, however, several other pretty important Islamist groups and non-Islamist nationalist groups, some of which are allied directly with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, others which are assembled in the so-called Syria National Army, which is armed and backed by Turkey. So this whole coalition of forces has been undertaking this offensive. It's difficult to tell which exact group is now spearheading the offensive going south towards Damascus. My sense is this is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. They were positioned closest in the Idlib province, and they're the ones clearly with a plan.
And in terms of that, you say they're with a plan. What is their end game then? Is it to depose President Assad?
Well, I would think that if they continue to rack up successes and the Syrian army, the regime army, crumbles before them, then they will see no reasons to stop. However, at that point, I think what we'll see is that foreign powers, pretty much all of which have suddenly rallied to shore up Bashar al-Assad's regime. I mean, we have from the United States and Israel on one side, all the way to Iran and Russia on the other, going through the United Arab Emirates and others, seem keen to keep Bashar al-Assad in power, at least in remaining parts of Syria that he controls. So if that starts to step up, and if some of these powers, in particular Israel, possibly Jordan, threaten to intervene in southern Syria to prevent an Islamist takeover of Damascus, then the Islamist rebels may need to pause and to work out some kind of negotiation, in which case I think we'll see Turkey playing a pivotal role.
And Yazid, I guess another question that many of our viewers will want the answer to is why now?
Well, the main backers of the Bashar al-Assad regime are otherwise occupied or have been badly hit. Hezbollah has been dealt massive blows by Israel in Lebanon. It pulled its troops away from Syria over the past couple of years. Russia is fighting Ukraine and has reduced its expeditionary force in Syria. Iran has been under direct attack by Israel in Syria for a decade. And so, this is perfect timing. Also, in the background, there was a Turkish negotiation with Bashar al-Assad trying to reach a deal which would assure the Turks that the Kurdish rebel groups, the so-called Syria Democratic Forces in northeast Syria, would be kept away from the Turkish border. And this negotiation has been ongoing with Bashar al-Assad, and he's been refusing Turkish demands. So I think also the Turks at this point wanted to ratchet up the pressure and push Bashar al-Assad very forcibly. What remains to be seen is whether the Assad regime will survive long enough for external powers to do anything, or will simply crumble, and therefore there'll be nothing for foreign powers to as it were, leverage in their intervention.
Yazid Saeed, thank you very much for taking us through some of the issues around that ongoing story in Syria.